Today we're going to be talking about a film released on Christmas Day of 1998. So naturally, we need to talk about 1996 first. 1996 proved to be a benchmark year for American media, especially genre media like science fiction and horror, each of those getting a major blockbuster film that various publications heralded as the return of said genre. For science fiction, that film was Independence Day, which was the highest grossing film of the year and, love it or hate it, plays a very important role in the development of today's film landscape. Time magazine ran a feature on it with the cover title, "Aliens Have Landed, Sci-Fi Makes a Comeback," which I honestly hate. Science fiction never went away, even in the realm of major studio productions. This was only 2 years after Roland Emmerich's previous film Stargate, only 3 years after Jurassic Park, only a year after Waterworld, and that's ignoring all the science fiction in literature, television, comic books, and video games. If anything, Independence Day brought back disaster movies, films where we watch in awe as cities crumble. A better case can be made for the return of the horror genre with Wes Craven's Scream. Horror hadn't really had any notable successes for a while. The genre was oversaturated in the 1980s with endless slasher film sequels that got progressively more convoluted and bonkers, plus a glut of cheap direct-to-video films, 50% of which had Clint Howard in them, which isn't a slight on Clint Howard. 2 years prior, Wes Craven had returned to the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise to direct what at the time was going to be the final installment in the series, Wes Craven's New Nightmare, which introduced a meta element to the story by having the cast and crew of the Nightmare on Elm Street film haunted and killed off by a demonic manifestation of Freddy Krueger. Many love it. I don't, but it's certainly the most interesting thing done with the franchise since Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge. Wes Craven would further explore these metatextual elements in Scream, filmed from a script by Kevin Williamson and distributed by Dimension Films, a division of Miramax. The characters in Scream were genre savvy. They knew the ins and outs of horror films, they knew the tropes, and when a mass serial killer starts killing them off, like in the movies, their knowledge of these films affect their actions and reactions. Scream was a financial and critical success, and Kevin Williamson would lead a charge in help making more viable horror blockbusters. Along with writing the script for Scream 2, he also wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer, the other major original slasher film IP of the 90s, and was one of the producers for Halloween H2O, which retconned a lot of the extraneous crap from the franchise. So horror films had made a comeback. Science fiction films had made a perceived comeback, so Dimension Films looked at this and went, what if we made a Scream for science fiction? What if we made a science fiction horror film with the same kind of metatextual elements, like genre-savvy teenagers who acted on situations based on the science fiction media they had consumed? Well, there was a script in the bin that might work called The Faculty, which had been written in 1990 by David Wetcher and Bruce Kimmel. It was about a group of unlikely students who have to come together when they discover their high school has been invaded by an alien element, a parasitic slug-like thing that enters and controls your body. Yes, I know. Believe me, I know. I really doubt Kay Applegate had access to unsold Hollywood scripts. Just, It was a good premise, but it wasn't screamy enough. So naturally, Kevin Williamson was brought in to rewrite it, retooling dialogue, characters, and, according to one source, making it more hip. That's such a 90s thing to do. Help! Our script isn't hip enough! It's not always easy to say what elements of the film came from Wetcher's and Kimmel's original script and what came from Williamson's rewrite, but I get the impression that each version has conflicting priorities. There are two large thematic ideas in The Faculty, and while they don't necessarily contradict each other, they do seem to be in conflict as to which one takes priority. First, plot summary. The Faculty concerns 6 students going to Harrington High School in Ohio, which has become ground zero for a secret invasion of alien parasites. There's Mary Beth, played by Laura Harris, the new student just trying to make friends. Zeke, played by Josh Hartnett, a held-back senior and a local drug dealer. Delilah, played by Jordana Brewster, the head cheerleader and editor of school newspaper. Stan, played by Sean Hatosi, the school's star quarterback and Delilah's boyfriend. Stokely, played by Clea Duvall, is a no-friends loner type. And finally, Casey, played by Elijah Wood, the target of the local school bullies. pretty stock high school stereotypes, but each of these characters have their own twists. Zeke is actually incredibly intelligent. He's well read in literature and science. It's never outright said why he hasn't graduated yet, but I believe the implication is that Zeke likes the feeling of superiority in being an important figure in school society with his distribution of illegal substances and fake IDs. Plus, he'd probably make a lot less money in college. Stan's talents are in football, but he doesn't actually want to play. His grades are failing and he wants to refocus on his education. This is at the ire of Delilah, who is basically play acting her school roles and is only dating Stan because that's what head cheerleaders and star quarterbacks are supposed to do. Stokely pushes people away by claiming to be a lesbian, which sadly was an effective method of doing so back in the late 90s, but she's actually straight and she's starting to come around to allowing people into her life. And again, she's played by Clea Duvall, which means that we have a lesbian playing a straight woman playing a lesbian. And Casey turns out to be the big action hero of the whole film. Can I take a moment to comment on this cast, which might be the most 1998 thing ever? A time when Josh Hartnett could still headline a movie. A time when Selma Hayek could still take small roles like horror movie victim. A time when Jon Stewart was just an actor and stand-up comedian, not the Daily Show guy. A time when the biggest internet celebrity you could get to cameo in your movie was Harry Knowles. Usher's in this movie. Barely, though you wouldn't know it from the posters where he's prominently displayed. The guy's got like 7 lines, he doesn't do anything, he just stands around being Usher. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention Robert Patrick as Coach Willis, who is fantastic as this imposing villain, but they do kind of unceremoniously forget about him by the finale. Oh yeah, I didn't say how Mary Beth is different. She's, the monster. She's the queen alien in human disguise, and it's with her that the first major theme begins to click into place. This is a film about how the American education system aims to take individuals and turn them into a singular unit, the student body, and how soulless that ultimately is. Even before the aliens invade, Harrington High is a shithole. It's small and filthy, the teachers are pessimistic, and one even drinks alcohol while on the clock. The very first scene in the film is a faculty meeting where the principal explains that there's no money for new computers, field trips, or a theater program. Pretty much all funds have to be allotted to the school's football team. This is a sports town and high school football is one of their major industries. It's dreary, but the film also doesn't present an alternative. This is the American school system, it says, in all of its glory, and it's not about education. This is the system of control that governs that student body, of which all our main characters are outliers to. The soundtrack is full of hip new covers of classic anti-school songs. Another Brick in the Wall, I'm 18, School's Out, songs like that. What's interesting here is that the alien invasion doesn't improve the school in any way. It's still the same dumpster fire afterwards. All the aliens are doing is forcing everyone onto the same page, forcing them all to think and act the same, creating an actual interconnected student body where these kids become one large unit. It's not really taking over the school so much as amplifying school, fulfilling the mission statement of school. This is brought into focus during Mary Beth's big villain speech at the end, which I can only play the audio of. She's walking around naked this entire scene.
You know, in my world, Casey, there were limitless oceans as far as the eye could see. Beautiful home till it started to dry up. So I escaped. Came here. I met you. All of you. All of you were different from the others. And I thought that maybe I could give you a taste of my world. A world without anger, without fear, without attitude. Where the underachiever goes home at night to parents who care. The jock can be smart, the ugly duckling beautiful, and the class wuss doesn't have to live in terror. And the new girl, well, the new girl, she can just fit right in with people who are just like her. You see, Casey? Even Mary Beth's feelings can be hurt by a bunch of pathetic, lost little outcasts who truly believe that their disaffected, lonely life is the only way they can survive. I can make you a part of something so special, Casey. So perfect. So fearless.
It's basically Stepford High School, with aliens instead of robots. And I'm partial to think that this is the theme from the original script, because it doesn't play into the obvious Scream retreads. But I wonder who's responsible for this final scene, which pretty much undoes this idea by having the kids conform once the alien invasion has been defeated. Casey is now popular and dating Delilah for some reason, and ignores other kids being bullied. Zeke is now on the football team, despite displaying no interest in school sports before this. Stokely stopped wearing black and is now dating Stan. The reason these characters were able to identify and stop the invasion was because they had stepped outside of the system. They played by their own rules, and the film rewards them by making them part of that system. This isn't meant to be ironic, I don't think. This is their reward, and I have to wonder if Williamson put this in to give the film a more studio-friendly ending. And actually, now that makes me wonder if Stokely really was supposed to be a lesbian after all, and her just pretending to be a lesbian was studio interference. I can't say for sure. Which brings us to Williamson putting in Scream elements into the film, making the film more hip. These elements don't really come out until about the halfway point, when Casey and Stokely meet at the school library to discuss the strange things going on, and they start to get into how similar these events are with various science fiction stories, most notably Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Look, all fiction is based on some truth, right? What does Miss Berg teach us in English 101? Write what you know. How do we know this writer guy
Jack Finney
didn't encounter aliens in his high school, which led him to write a book about an alien invasion?
Your conspiracy theory is flawed.
How so?
Well, Jack Finney's The Body Snatchers is a blatant ripoff of The Puppet Masters by Robert Heinlein, so you can completely disregard that entire work.
Whatever. The point is, they're here, they've been here, and they're here again.
This leads into this weird idea that science fiction media was in some way orchestrated by aliens to make us not believe in them or something. I don't know, this goes nowhere. And from that point on, the characters act under the assumption that the aliens are functioning by the rules of Earth-created science fiction media. This is a much weaker idea than the monsters as metaphors for high school, a la Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The reason this level of meta-discussion worked in Scream was because the killer was as genre-savvy as the rest of the characters, and can use that to their advantage. Everybody was in on the joke. The alien villains here are not familiar with human-created science fiction horror. They are not in on the joke. There's no actual evidence of this massive media conspiracy Casey brings up. It's a pretty small invasion. Any similarities between these aliens and aliens from other movies is entirely coincidental. These kids aren't being smart by being genre savvy, they totally lucked out that the aliens actually are the way they are. It also lacks the cultural context that made Scream feel fresh. Scream was having fun with the trappings of a genre that hadn't been doing well for a while, a genre that was in desperate need of some self-reflection and winking parody to shake out the cobwebs. Science fiction didn't have that low point, or if you were to believe Time magazine, it had found its feet again 2 years prior with Independence Day. Scream was a very specific antidote to a very specific problem, and it's not necessarily applicable to just any old genre you apply it to. Science fiction didn't need it. Westerns needed their own Scream before science fiction did, and cowboys don't even watch movies. Side note, director Robert Rodriguez was actually considered to direct Scream before they gave it to Wes Craven. I haven't really brought the director up because this doesn't really feel like a Robert Rodriguez film. It doesn't really have the violent excesses of his grown-up films or the unsettling artificiality of his children's films. It feels more like a work for hire than a passion project, probably why there isn't a DVD with a film school feature on it like most of Rodriguez's stuff. I'm so proud of the ins and outs of how we made Desperado, but The Faculty? I just wasn't doing anything at the time. The Faculty feels exactly like the compromise made when bringing a pre-Scream film into a post-Scream world. There's a lot to like about the film. The cast is a lot of fun, the special effects have aged decently for the most part, there's a big practical effects monster at the end, the soundtrack is great, there's some nice touches in how some scenes are framed. I would consider it a solid B+ science fiction horror film, but you can really feel that rewrite, that moment where it goes, Okay, enough of that character stuff. This is Scream now. If you want to do Scream for science fiction, fine, you do you. But you should probably build a script from the ground up with that idea in mind, not try and graft that idea onto a pre-existing story. Also, how the hell did Jean Grey survive this? No amount of alien voodoo is bringing you back from a decapitation.